I remember the silence first. Not the peaceful kind, but a heavy, suffocating quiet that swallowed every sound. My boots crunched on the fallen leaves, each step echoing unnaturally loud in the vast, ancient forest. I'd hiked this trail a dozen times, felt the familiar comfort of the towering pines and the crisp mountain air. But that day, something was different. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, a feeling I couldn't shake. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced I wasn't alone, even though the trail stretched empty behind me. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in a bruised purple. And that's when I saw it. Just off the path, a single, worn hiking boot, its laces still tied, sitting perfectly upright, as if someone had simply stepped out of it, and then vanished. My breath caught in my throat, my breath caught in my throat, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the overwhelming silence. I stared at the boot, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. It wasn't just dropped, it was placed, carefully, as if the person wearing it had simply dissolved into the air. A shiver, colder than the mountain air, traced a path down my spine. This wasn't a lost item. This was a statement. I forced myself to take a step closer, my eyes darting nervously into the dense undergrowth surrounding it. The shadows were deepening, stretching long, gnarled fingers across the forest floor. Every rustle of leaves, every distant creak of a branch sounded amplified, predatory. My imagination, usually a comforting companion on these solitary hikes, now turned against me, conjuring grotesque shapes in the periphery of my vision. "Hello?" My voice came out as a thin, reedy whisper, barely audible above my own ragged breathing. It sounded pathetic, swallowed instantly by the vast emptiness. No answer. Of course not. Who would answer? The person who owned this boot was gone. I knelt beside it, my fingers trembling as I reached out, not quite touching. It was a well-worn boot, sturdy leather, a familiar brand, the kind hikers wore for serious treks. There was no mud, no scuff marks on the laces that suggested it had been kicked off in a struggle. Just upright, perfectly still. It felt wrong, profoundly wrong, like an object defying the laws of physics and common sense. My gaze swept the immediate area, desperate for any other clue, a dropped water bottle, a backpack, anything. But there was nothing, just the boot and the encroaching gloom. A sudden sharp crackle from deeper in the woods made me jump, nearly tumbling backward. My head whipped around, straining to see through the fading light. Was it an animal, a deer, or something else? The air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible scent reached me. Something metallic, like old blood, mixed with damp earth. Or was that just my fear playing tricks on me?
I scrambled back to my feet, my legs feeling like jelly. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of this place, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But another part, a morbid curiosity mingled with a desperate need for answers, held me rooted. This wasn't just a random act of nature. Someone had been here, and now they weren't. My eyes scanned the ground again, following the faint indentation in the leaves where the boots sat. And then, a few feet away, partially obscured by a fallen log, I saw it. Another boot. Not upright this time, but lying on its side, as if tossed carelessly. And beside it, a small, dark stain on the otherwise pristine forest floor. My stomach lurched. The metallic smell intensified, undeniable now. It was blood. Fresh, or at least recent enough to still carry that chilling tang. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a lost hiker. This was something far, far worse. The silent forest transformed from a place of natural beauty into a sinister, watchful entity. I felt its gaze, heavy and malevolent. I was no longer alone. I was being watched. My breath hitched. I had to get out of here, right now. The sight of that second boot, the blood stain, it was a punch to the gut. All thoughts of morbid curiosity, of finding answers evaporated, replaced by a primal, screaming need to escape. My legs, which had been like jelly moments before, now pulsed with a jolt of adrenaline. I spun around, not even bothering to look back at the horrific tableau, and stumbled. My foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling. The impact jarred my teeth, and a sharp pain shot up my arm, but I barely registered it. Scrambling to my hands and knees, I pushed myself up, my eyes wide, darting through the deepening gloom. Which way was the trail? The path I'd followed so confidently moments ago now seemed to have vanished, swallowed by the encroaching shadows and the dense undergrowth. Panic clawed at my throat, tightening its grip. I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but there was no time for tears. There was only time to run. I started moving, not caring where, just away. Away from the boots, away from the blood, away from the feeling of being watched. Branches whipped at my face, leaves rustled under my frantic steps, sounding like 1,000 tiny whisperers chasing me. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Each breath was a ragged gasp tearing at my lungs. The forest itself seemed to conspire against me. Trees loomed, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out to snag me. Shadows danced and twisted, forming monstrous shapes in my peripheral vision. I convinced myself I could hear something behind me, a faint rustle, a heavy tread that wasn't my own. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't.
What if I saw it? What if whatever had done this was right there, just out of sight, playing with me? My mind raced, replaying the image of the upright boot, then the blood. Who was this person? What had happened? The questions were irrelevant now. Survival was the only thing that mattered. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I pushed harder, forcing my body forward through the increasingly dense woods. I had to find the trail, had to find a sign of civilization, anything to break this suffocating isolation. Then, through the trees, a flicker of something. Not the trail, but a small, derelict wooden sign, half covered in moss. It pointed towards a rarely used, unofficial shortcut to the park boundary. A shortcut I'd only taken once, years ago. It was overgrown, dangerous, but it was a direction. It was hope. I veered sharply, fighting through thick brambles that tore at my clothes and scratched my skin. I didn't care. The thought of reaching the edge of the park, of seeing a road, a car, propelled me forward. The sun had long since vanished, plunging the forest into a twilight world where every tree looked identical, every shadow a potential threat. My sense of direction was failing, but I clung to the idea of that shortcut, a desperate prayer in the wilderness. A twig snapped loudly, much closer this time. Not under my foot, but to my left. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, every muscle tensed. Was it an animal, or was it them? The air grew impossibly still, the only sound the frantic thumping of my own heart in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fraction of a second, then forced them open, scanning the darkness. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, a tangible pressure on the back of my neck. I bolted again, a fresh wave of terror washing over me, knowing that whatever was out there, it was now closer. It was hunting. The terror propelled me forward, a raw animalistic instinct overriding all rational thought. My lungs burned, each breath a searing agony, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't even slow down.
The snapping twig was a physical presence in my mind, a confirmation that I wasn't imagining things, that something was out there, and it was deliberately tracking me. My legs, already screaming with exhaustion, found a new reserve of frantic energy, fueled by pure, unadulterated fear. I crashed through undergrowth, thorns tearing at my clothes, branches whipping my face, but I barely registered the pain. All I knew was the desperate need to put distance between myself and whatever lurked in the deepening gloom behind me. The forest had become a labyrinth of horrors. Every tree trunk looked like a lurking figure, every shadow a monstrous shape. The wind rustling through the leaves sounded like whispers, mocking me, guiding the unseen predator.
I stumbled again, pitching forward, my hands scraping against rough bark as I caught myself. My vision blurred with tears and exhaustion, but I forced my eyes open, scanning frantically. Where was the shortcut? Where was the edge of this nightmare? The moss-covered sign felt like a lifetime ago, a cruel mirage in this endless, dark wilderness. I was completely lost, disoriented, my internal compass shattered by panic. Then, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the air. It wasn't the sound of a bear or a coyote. It was deeper, more resonant, and chillingly intelligent. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, wrapping around me like a cold, suffocating blanket. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an animal. This was something else, something utterly malevolent. A choked scream caught in my throat. I pushed harder, my legs churning, no longer caring about the direction, just away, away from that sound. My foot landed awkwardly, sending a jolt of pain up my ankle. I cried out, a pathetic whimper, but kept moving, limping now, my pace slowing despite my desperate will. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the distinct sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth behind me. Not the light, furtive steps of an animal, but deliberate, heavy strides. It was gaining on me. I risked a glance over my shoulder, a split-second decision that felt like an eternity. Through the tangled branches and the oppressive darkness, I saw it. A hulking, indistinct shape, darker than the deepest shadows, moving with an unnatural speed and fluidity. Its form seemed to ripple, to shift, as if the very darkness was coalescing around it. No, not coalescing. It was the darkness. Its eyes, two pinpricks of malevolent light, seemed to bore into me, even from that distance. A fresh wave of terror, so potent it stole my breath, washed over me. This was no ordinary predator. This was something ancient, something that belonged to the darkest corners of myth, and it was hunting me. I let out a full-throated scream, a primal cry of pure terror that ripped through the silent forest, and somehow found another burst of adrenaline, a desperate final surge. I had to get out. I had to, or I would be the next vanishing hiker. My scream tore through the night, a raw, ragged sound that felt ripped from the very core of my being. My legs, somehow, found a final agonizing surge of strength. I wasn't running anymore. I was a blur of pure instinct, fueled by the terrifying image seared into my mind. Those twin pinpricks of malevolent light, the rippling darkness that was its form. My lungs were burning, each breath a shallow, tearing gasp that tasted of iron and fear. Branches whipped my face, leaving stinging trails, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. All that mattered was forward, away, escape. The heavy footsteps behind me were no longer just gaining. They were pounding, rhythmic and terrifyingly close. The ground vibrated with each impact. I could hear the rustle of massive bulk displacing leaves and snapping twigs, a sound far too large, too powerful to be anything natural. It wasn't just following, it was hunting, closing the distance with terrifying precision, as if it knew every twist and turn of my desperate flight. The air grew colder around me, a sudden, unnatural chill that bit at my exposed skin, even as sweat plastered my hair to my forehead. It carried a faint, acrid smell now, something metallic and rotten, like decay mixed with ozone, a smell that clawed at the back of my throat. I burst through a thicket of thorny bushes, ignoring the searing pain as they tore at my arms and legs. My vision was tunneling, the edges of my sight blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope of dark green and black. My ankle, already injured, gave out with a sickening twist. I pitched forward, my face slamming into the damp earth, a mouthful of soil and leaves filling my mouth. The impact was brutal, knocking the wind out of me, leaving me gasping, momentarily stunned. And then, silence. A deafening, absolute silence. The pounding footsteps had stopped, the rustling had ceased. Even the frantic thumping of my own heart seemed to vanish, replaced by a hollow echo in my ears. I lay there, face pressed into the cold earth, unable to move, unable to even breathe. I knew, with a certainty that froze my very soul, that it was here, right behind me, watching, waiting. Slowly, agonizingly, I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees, my muscles screaming in protest. My head throbbed, a dull ache blooming behind my eyes. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. My eyes, wide and unfocused, darted around, searching for anything, any small detail that could offer an escape, a weapon, a hope. There was nothing but the impenetrable wall of darkness, the oppressive weight of its presence. Then, a sound. Not a growl, not a step, but a low, resonant hum. It wasn't heard with my ears, but felt in my bones, vibrating through the earth, through my very core. It was a sound that spoke of ancient power, of something that existed beyond human comprehension. It was a sound that spoke of hunger. A shadow fell over me, deeper and colder than the surrounding night. My breath caught in my throat, a tiny, desperate gasp. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing, praying for it to be a dream, a nightmare from which I would wake. But the cold, acrid scent intensified, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I could feel the heat radiating from its immense form, a strange, inverse heat that felt like absolute zero. I opened my eyes. It was there. Towering over me, a colossal silhouette against the faint, bruised purple of the dying night sky that somehow still filtered through the dense canopy. It was a humanoid shape, but grotesquely distorted, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and gnarled like ancient tree roots. Its skin, or what I perceived as skin, was the color of dried blood and shadow, absorbing what little light remained. No, not absorbing light, it was the absence of light. Its form seemed to undulate, to shift at the edges, as if its very existence defied static definition. Its head was large, devoid of discernible features at first, until 2 points of light flared to life within the darkness of its face. Not eyes, not really. They were like embers, burning with a cold, malevolent intelligence that pierced straight through me, stripping away every defense, every shred of courage. I saw not just its presence, but its intent. It wasn't just going to kill me. It was going to consume me. Every thought, every memory, every trace of who I was. I would simply vanish, leaving behind nothing but an empty space, like those hikers who had left their boots. A massive hand, larger than my torso, slowly extended towards me. Its fingers were long, bony, tipped with claws that seemed to drink the light, leaving trails of deeper darkness in their wake. It moved with a terrifying slowness, deliberate, savoring the moment. I was paralyzed, utterly incapable of movement, my body screaming to flee, but my mind trapped in the horror of its gaze. The hum intensified, a low thrumming that resonated in my skull, threatening to shatter my sanity. As the shadowy fingers began to close around my arm, a searing, agonizing pain shot through me, not from physical contact, but from the sheer coldness, the spiritual drain of its touch. It felt like my very essence was being pulled from my body, like a part of me was already gone. I felt a scream tear from my throat, but it was silent, swallowed by the oppressive presence. My vision swam, the world tilting precariously. This was it. This was the end. I was going to be another vanishing hiker, my story ending right here, absorbed into the malevolent darkness of this ancient, dreadful thing. Just as the cold, draining grip tightened, a faint, metallic clang echoed from somewhere to my right. It was a small sound, almost insignificant, but in that overwhelming silence, it was a thunderclap. The creature paused, its grip momentarily loosening, its pinprick eyes flicking away from me, towards the source of the noise. It was barely a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The spell broke. A surge of raw, animalistic terror, combined with a desperate will to live, jolted through me. I twisted violently, tearing my arm free from its chilling grasp, the skin where it touched me burning with an unnatural frostbite.
I scrambled backward, not even looking, just moving, pushing myself away from that towering horror. My ankle screamed in protest, but I ignored it, adrenaline flooding my system, overriding the pain. I didn't know what that sound was, or who made it, but it had bought me a second, a precious, agonizing second. And I took it. I stumbled to my feet, half crawling, half stumbling, my eyes fixed on the path ahead, on anything that wasn't that thing. It was still there, a colossal shadow, its head slightly cocked, listening. I didn't wait to see if it would turn back to me. I just ran. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, praying with every frantic heartbeat that I would make it out of this nightmare. I had seen it, I had faced it, and I was still running. I ran until my lungs screamed for air, until my legs buckled beneath me, until the dense canopy finally gave way to a sliver of bruised moonlight. I stumbled out of the tree line onto a narrow, forgotten fire road and collapsed, gasping, shaking. I don't remember how long I lay there, just the cold asphalt beneath my cheek, the distant hum of civilization, a fragile lifeline. Eventually, I dragged myself up, limped for what felt like miles, and found my way back to the world of streetlights and car horns. But I never truly came back. The physical scars eventually faded, the scratches, the bruises, the twisted ankle. But the others, the ones etched onto my soul, those remain. The forest, once a place of peace, is now a labyrinth of terror in my mind. Every shadow holds a lurking form. Every rustle of leaves sounds like heavy footsteps gaining ground. I see those malevolent pinpricks of light in the darkest corners of my waking thoughts. And in the nightmares that still wake me, drenched in a cold sweat, feeling that spiritual drain, that unnatural frostbite on my arm. The vanishing hikers? I know now, they didn't just get lost. They were found, consumed, erased. That single upright boot wasn't a clue, it was a signature. A chilling testament to what happens when the darkness decides it's hungry. I survived, yes, but I carry the weight of what I saw, what I felt, what almost took me. It's out there, still, waiting, and I know it remembers me. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. There are forces at work in those ancient woods, things older than memory, hungrier than any beast. Things that defy explanation, that exist beyond the veil of our understanding.
Have you ever felt an inexplicable cold in the wilderness? Heard a growl that wasn't animal? Seen eyes that burned with a malevolent intelligence from the impenetrable darkness? If you have, if you've brushed against that dreadful echo, then you know what I'm talking about. And you know too that some secrets are better left buried, because once you see them, they see you, and they never truly let you go.